everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the Payload, back by popular demand and many, many angry DMs asking me why I am a schmuck and why Around the Payload isn't every week. We are back, and we are ready to serve you guys some great Overwatch League content right at the end of this amazing Stage 3. If you guys are here for the very first time, we are a Overwatch League and Overwatch competitive centered game show where we take the game part of it very, very seriously, and we are going to be giving out points. And this is, I hate to say it, but this is literally life and death.
Yep.
And if you couldn't tell by that intro, I'm 100% serious. But we will be going through and talking about a number of different topics, and I will be giving out points as the almighty game master. You're going to be hearing a sound that sounds a little bit like this. That is me giving out points. Don't think that something is broken. Although something might be broken, but it's not. It is not that sound. But without further ado, let me introduce my wonderful, wonderful guests. In the upper left-hand corner, we have, and I did this on purpose. We have left guy himself, former, I would say still current Overwatch personality, and it's certainly a current Overwatch fan. Welcome back, sir.
It's so good to be back. I missed you all so much.
we missed you too. I definitely have sent out multiple messages over the past few months, and we've just finally now gotten it.
Glad we were able to make it work.
Yes, me too. In the upper right, we have the newcomer and writer for Upcomer, caster, and host Katrina Weil. Did I get it right?
You did. You got it right. I'm excited to be here.
First try.
It's gonna be so much fun. I can't believe you didn't tell me this was life and death until like just now. So
that's what makes it life and death.
Yeah. I'm a lot more nervous now. Thank you. So, it'll be a good time though. We'll see.
Yes. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have founder of Broadcast GG, the one and only Mooshubeef.
Hello, thanks for having me again, dude. Despite my the fact that I bring no hot takes, no knowledge, and no personality. I appreciate it.
Hey, that's my gig. Stay away from that. That's me. That's my job to do that.
Well, I'm fighting down towards you, so you have some competition, my friend.
Well, luckily I'm not in this competition, so you stand alone here. But last here is Deathblow, founder and co-host of High Noon Podcast. Welcome. Hey, I didn't say it, but
thank you so much for inviting me to a show on a network that I co-founded.
You know what? You're welcome. You're always invited, but you know sometimes it's nice. It's nice to get you back around.
We have such great guests, and all we could get this time was Mushu and Gil. So I decided that I would try to raise the bar a little.
Carry us, yeah.
Man, we are
easy clap, you know.
We are throwing the shade.
I left Katrina alone. She
nice and early.
Nervous, so I had to...
You're too kind. I'm gonna destroy you.
I've got to say, playing favorites is going to get you no points here. That's a -1 for DB, and Katrina with the brutal honesty. That's a +1 right off the bat before we even start. But let's jump right into it with round number 1.
Round 1, capture the objective.
So we got a humdinger of a piece of news in. We are getting Overwatch League 2020 has now confirmed that we are going to be having homestands. We're going to be having not home games like a traditional sports like we necessarily thought it might be going into it, but we now are going to be having a series of homestands like we've seen with Dallas and Atlanta thus far, and we'll be seeing later on in this season with LA. So, Gil, we'll start with you. What do you think of these homestands? Are these good for the league? What are your general thoughts on Overwatch League 2020 and the homestands?
I think everyone was wondering, what is it going to actually look like in 2020? Are these teams, and is Blizzard going to be able to deliver on the promise to have home games in 2020 so soon? And I think this is the best way to do it. After being at the Dallas homestand weekend and seeing the reaction there, it was very clear that this was the best way to do it. I think one of the biggest problems with some of the early iterations of the plan was that if every team has their own venue, it just doesn't make financial sense in the least. As someone who opened or helped open Esports Stadium Arlington here in Texas, this is something we talked about a lot, and there just aren't enough esports events to sustain a venue for every team, I mean, even half the teams if we did it that way. And so right now, to have a venue that's dedicated just to the Overwatch League for like a handful of home games a season just doesn't make any sense. But we still need to get the hometown fans engaged. And man, were they engaged at that Dallas homestand weekend. I wasn't at Atlanta, but it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, really looking forward to actually being at one of these home games. But Katrina, what are your thoughts here on the homesteads? What are you thinking about them?
I think that it's exactly what Overwatch League was promising, kind of building off of what Left Guy was saying. Philly's already said that they are going to have a specific esports arena in, I believe, 2021, so I am concerned for the longevity of this current plan. Excited to see how this evolves. But based off of leaks of a recent phone call with stakeholders and players, I think some of the main points I was most excited to hear about was stability with the visas. Blizzard providing a lot of assistance. I'm not sure I completely buy that still. It took them, 3 months to get Sideshow and Owl. It took Jachiran almost 3 stages to get over to Los Angeles, so I still am concerned and hesitant about that travel. Another thing that is really interesting for me is that Owl teams are able to retain their position. They can live wherever they choose to. So the Washington Justice doesn't need to stay centered in Washington. So if that little LA center is retained for these players, I could see that being really useful for, say, trades. So Fraggy moving over to Guangzhou. Instead of having to deal with visas moving all across the world, he just moves down the block. So there's definitely some lenience and some good baby steps moving forward to counter those visa issues.
Yeah, visa issues are probably the unsung villain in this the whole globalism of the league. But Mushu, what are your thoughts here on homesteads?
When the Nanzer tweet went out, I was very confused and nervous and like, wow, how are they going to do this? How are they going to pull off home games? Because we're thinking about how they would do an entire season. Like you can do 28 games in some home stadium. And just like the other points that were brought up, the biggest concern is how do you justify like going from having no games in this city to all of a sudden having 28, right? Or whatever. Like they did confirm that it was going to be 28 games again per team. So that was like just thinking logistically and having run some events. I helped out with a shock with some events in the Bay Area. And it was like, it's a lot of work. And then like, we're still figuring out how to make esports, how to make money in esports, right? So I was like, this is going to take an insane amount of investment. But that being said, if we're only looking at 2 games for some places, and I think up to 5 in other areas, that is like a much better, it feels like it's a good in between. And it might even be something that you can, go long-term with in terms of having the seasons go. At the very least, it feels a lot more doable, and the idea that it doesn't have to be the same amount of like pressure on each team depending on their resources, like more on teams that have connections or partnerships with local arenas, who are people like Comcast and Cox who have these facilities already. Like it makes sense for those people to be leaned on more as we're transitioning towards making the whole entire league sustainable, right? So it's going to be a really good way to start farming out and understanding how to reach best practices that can then be implemented across the league. And so, yeah, I definitely feel a lot better about this for everyone who's going to be involved. Of course, versus 28 games in a home city versus 2 to 5.
Right. Yeah, definitely seems to be a little bit of the best of both worlds here. But Deathblow, last words here on the homesteads. I don't even. Homestands. Yeah, I'm probably gonna get shot by Blizzard if I keep saying it wrong. Last words here on the homestands.
Generally speaking, I think it's as close as we were going to get to the ideal system for the first year of regionality. I do think there's some obvious problems with it. We'll be getting to my biggest issue in round 2, so I don't want to spoil things too much there. But, you really need to get these teams playing games in their local markets. The teams have done some better than others, but a lot of them have done a good job reaching their home markets, getting their home fan bases involved. And it's time to reward those fan bases and those people that really mobilized for their team and have been supporting them. So I think it's great that we're going to be moving in that direction. Hopefully we can continue to make improvements. I don't remember who exactly said it, but getting closer to those best practices. What's the right way to do this? And I think this gives them a good opportunity to figure a lot of things out, try some things, try different venue sizes for, different cities, different size markets, things like that. See, we don't know what the response is going to be from these fan bases, right? So now all of a sudden, you're not needing to have that place blocked off for however many games, and is it too big? Does it look bad on camera when you don't fill it out? Things like that. So I think there's a lot to love about this, and most importantly, I think the fans needed this and deserved it. So I'm really, really glad they're going to be getting, and that includes us since we're so close to Toronto. It'll be great to be able to go to those things. So as somebody that is looking forward to taking advantage of these home games, to get out and see some Overwatch League matches live, I think it's a great first step. But yeah, we'll talk about some of the issues with it a little later.
Yeah, for sure. And in that vein, we are officially launching the Kickstarter for the High Noon Party Bus. You can donate now, and we're going to buy a party. No, okay. I mean, we would, but
on,
it's
man.
probably not going to happen.
3v3 LAN on the road. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, the party bus would be pretty sweet. We deck it out and just travel to all the homesteads. But well, I guess half of them because they go on simultaneously. But that's neither here nor there. Let's move on here to our next topic, where with this OWL 2020, we got another announcement that the divisions of the Overwatch League are going to be broken down a little bit differently. We still have the conferences, the Atlantic and Pacific conferences, but we now have a Atlantic North division, which has Uprising, Spitfire, NYXL, Paris, and Toronto, as well as an Atlantic South division, which has Reign, Mayhem, Outlaws, Fusion, and Justice. We have the Pacific Conference East, which has Chengdu Hunters, Guangzhou Charge, Hangzhou Spark, Shanghai Dragons, and Seoul Dynasty, and the Pacific West rounds out the rest of the teams with Dallas Fuel, both LA teams, San Francisco Shock, and the Vancouver Titans. With this new homestand, is it? I already forgot. Is it homestand or homestead? Stand. I'm going to say it wrong on purpose now. With these new homestands and the breakdown of games, Katrina, we'll start with you. What do you think about this new divisional breakdown as well?
I think it's a really exciting step forward. I mean, I'm from the Midwest. My grandparents were Green Bay Packers fans. My family, my parents were Chicago Bears fans. So that interdivisional rivalry is going to be so important, especially now that stage playoffs, which really bring a lot of the excitement to the Overwatch League, will not be a factor in next year. So I think, though, a lot of people's reactions when seeing these divisions is comparing the weakness of the Atlantic South, where you have Mayhem, Justice, Atlanta, to the Pacific West, where you have Shock, Titans, Gladiators. Like there's a bit of a difference, let's just say. Well, maybe more than a bit, between the quality of play of those teams as of right now. However, while that's valid, looking at that right now, there's so much of a competitive shift, even within a season, due to pickups, which we will discuss a little bit later today. And also, Overwatch League has relatively shorter contracts, so you can have, like we saw with the Shanghai Dragons, a complete new transition. So I would warn people who are a bit skeptical about the strength of each of these divisions to kind of wait for next year, see what those pan out to be like. I am still concerned, though, for Atlantic South, not because of the weakness of these teams right now, but we saw at the Atlanta homestand, there was a lot of empty seats for games that didn't really matter. I think only 1 or 2 games had playoff implications for Stage 3, and there were so many empty seats. We saw pictures on Twitter. It doesn't bode well for interest and attendance if you have the Florida Mayhem and the Justice competing against each other if they are performing at the same rate next year.
Right. Yeah, definitely a concern moving into OWL 2020, and even now with the current Overwatch League structure. But Mushu, what do you think about these divisions?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'm worried about, of course, is that in terms of, like, you're playing these teams twice, right? You play within your division twice. I'm sorry. Take off 2 points. I'm going to restart my answer because what I really was trying to say.
I mean, I wasn't going to take off 2 points, but now I will.
Yeah,
wow.
Hey man, I'm racing for the bottom this time. I'm tired of winning this show every time. So I'm trying to be
You're
smart, but
so full
also
of it.
Took a big game, yeah.
so all right. So usually the challenge with with interdivisional play is that you only play those teams within that division, right? That's one of the usual challenges in traditional sports. Sometimes we'll see like teams that never play each other who and because you're only playing with teams within your division, if your whole division as a whole isn't that good, then you just are never you're just segmented away from everyone else, right? It's like kind of Korean contenders versus like South American contenders, right? Where they're never going to play each other, and if South American teams did play against Korea all the time, they would like improve their skills drastically. Because they can't, that's why they can kind of exist on their own. So when I was looking at these divisions being smaller, I was slightly concerned about that. Like, what if some of these divisions are grouped up in a way to where there's going to be teams that start to like drift apart from each other? Like, especially you're looking at the teams that are in China and Korea, right? We expect a lot of the really like a ton of the really mechanically gifted players to be continuing to represent those teams. But the fact that they have, it's only 2 games in your division and then 1 game against everyone else too. So that's not a thing. That was one thing I was really concerned about here. I think, of course, like the main reason why this is happening is because of logistics. One of the initial ideas that I had around how would you do localization, when he said in-home markets, when I was trying to interpret what Nanzer was saying, like could they just have one venue where they have all of the games first stage that are in that market, and then you go to another, like go to China, you have all of the games that stage in that market. So that was another idea I had as well around how they could solve for divisions. So I think in terms of the impact on the ability for these teams to play against each other and make sure that as a whole, like you won't see any divergences in terms of how the teams can get practice. So yeah, that's not really a concern. I think this is mostly for the fact that they have to plan logistics around this, around flying around to these different homestands, and so I think this simplifies that without taking too much away from the fact that eventually, if you had just completely segmented divisions, then a skill gap could occur.
Yeah, at least in terms of the matchups, I don't think we're seeing anything different really than we did this season. So that's a plus, I think. Deathblow, what are your thoughts on the division breakdown?
I mean, we've talked about this a lot, Blevins, on the flagship show. We know I love the division rivalry aspect of things like that. I want to see these teams get to the point where they're playing inside their division more often than outside their division. I'm completely fine with them not playing in the other conference, playing somebody in the other conference if we need to do that to get there. So I think it's great, if for no other reason than everybody in Houston's division kind of sucks. So great. But nonetheless, people are worried about that, and maybe rightfully so. The disparity is going to happen. But one thing to remember, everybody that got signed for season 1 was on a 1-year with a 2nd-year option contract, which means the entire league is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So we don't know what any of these teams are going to look like going into season 3. So I don't think we can really accurately predict anything there. So there's no reason to have any doom and gloom theories as far as that's concerned. It's just something that the league needs. It's fun. You want these rivalries to exist, so you put them in an environment that fosters those rivalries. I guess my only complaint is Houston and Dallas would be probably one of the most fun rivalries in the league, and they are not even in the same conference. So that's a little unfortunate there. I do get it. I would love to beat Dallas more often than we currently get the opportunity to. But, at the end of the day, there's never going to be an absolutely perfect solution for this. So I'm willing to make that concession as long as we're feeding some of the other rivalries. There's going to be some great ones in China, for example. I think a lot of those teams are going to be really good, close rivals there. So, yeah, I might have broken it up a little differently, but not because of strength of teams or anything like that. It's just a great positive step. And people worried about what it's going to do to matches. I think Monty was on Twitter saying people next year are going to play the same opponents, maybe not in the same order at the same time or whatever. But the opponents will be exactly the same next season that they are this season. So it's not, I mean, I know you look at Dallas's division and you look at Vancouver and San Francisco in it and everybody, and you just like, oh, if you're a Dallas fan, it's got to be a gut shot. You're like, we're never going to crawl out of this division. you don't have to worry about it next year. It's not actually going to be like you have to play against, those two teams an extra 3 times. So I think they're doing it right. They're kind of baby stepping us into this entire thing, both the divisions, the home stands, all that stuff. And I think that's good because it gives us a chance to adapt and kind of grow with it rather than just rip the Band-Aid right off and have fan bases feel like they were wronged or something like that. That listen, if you lose, it's because you knew who your opponents were, right? Like in the NFL, I don't get to complain that the Bills keep losing to the Patriots. They just are doing a better job across the board as a franchise. Also, they're filthy, rotten cheaters, but that's a completely different conversation. So there's
it's an important conversation though.
It is. But
yeah, let's turn to
cheating
Deflategate actually.
On top of their cheating and scumbaggery, they're also just doing a better job than everybody else in the division. So you reap what you sow, and if you put out an inferior product, you're going to lose regardless of whether or not there's divisions or not. So.
Yeah, I'm going to for everyone listening that was just about to close the podcast. We're not actually going to be talking about a 5-year-old controversy that no one cares about. Gillfrost.
You were wrong.
No one. I'm right here, Blevins.
Last words here on the divisions, and please no more words on Deflategate.
Yeah, I'll go and leave that one as deflated as it'll ever be. But yeah, honestly, when I look at the new divisional breakdown, nonplussed would be the phrase that kind of comes up. It's one of my favorite phrases, and in this case, it's very apropos. I think short term, really not going to have a big impact. When you look at the divisions, yeah, sure, there definitely are stacked, and the opposite of stacked. I'll leave you that so however you want to define that divisions, but the conferences are really what matter here. Because it's not that you're going to play more within your division. You're going to be playing more within your conference. This is more setting things up for the future. So I like what Kat said about baby steps. By the way, can I call you Kat Katrina?
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. I'm like, yeah, if you want to call me Kat, you can. But...
yeah. And anyway, back onto the train.
Not anymore. Not
anymore. Plus,
no, baby
plus 3 points for Gil.
It's Katrina, Gil.
That's what I get. Yeah. I'll take
Oh my gosh, you can see my blush coming in.
Oh man.
You're good.
Had to
Anyway,
make a little
back
bit
on
weirder.
Topic. Baby steps, people. Okay. That this is just a step in the evolution of the league. And I think that one thing that Blizzard did that maybe caused some problems inadvertently was promise a lot. They had big dreams for what this league was going to be. And a lot of people then, when it wasn't that way in the first season, they're all angry and, disgruntled and I don't think they can do it. I don't think it's ever going to be like this. But what you got to realize is that they were playing the long game. Blizzard's playing the long game with this. They're taking the steps to get to those rivalries, like we were just talking about, that happened over time. And this is a good step in that direction. I'm curious to see if they use the divisions differently in the future. Similar to other traditional sports and other competitions that use divisions like this. But for now, not really going to make a big deal. I will reiterate, though, really disappointed that they split Texas in half. When I was at the Dallas homestand weekend, it was like 3/4 Dallas fans and like 1/4 Houston Outlaws fans, and the energy was pretty high on both sides. And that probably will still exist, at least for the next couple of years, but it's definitely not going to be amplified in the same way that it could be if they were in the same division. But we'll see, there's a lot that could still change.
Yeah, I mean, Yankees-Mets rivalry is not the same as Yankees-Red Sox is all that I'll say for that. Although the Subway Series back in we're not gonna do inside baseball. We're not gonna do football controversies, and we're going to not refer to people as animals, or at least not meow anymore. Maybe we will meow, I don't know. But that's gonna be the end of that. And looks like we've been banned from Twitch. But last question here in round number 1. Speaking of banned, no, that doesn't really work. Speaking of things being removed from things, stage playoffs are now gone. We got there. With the divisions, with the home stands, the stage playoffs have been eliminated for a variety of reasons. But Deathblow, I know you are very relatively vocally apathetic towards the stage playoffs in your mind. So we'll start with you here. What are you thinking about the death of the stage?
Oh man, who cares? They were not really important to me, and even a little bit. They're exhibition games. It feels so strange and weird to me to stop 3 times in the middle of a season in between games that matter to play games that don't. I, as a fan of my team, I don't even care if those teams win them. I don't like. It just doesn't affect me. If, as a Houston Outlaws fan, Linkser gets to put a little bit more money in his pocket at the end of the stage, it's just nothing to me. We always had to kind of ask ourselves these questions of, do the teams even care about them, right? Because we've long talked about this. It doesn't explain all of their failures, Blevins, but the New York Excelsior, I don't think, are in the stage playoff business. They don't look like a team to me that comes out and all of a sudden is giving, an extra 10% effort in the stage playoffs by benching SBB as soon as they get there, by the way. It's backwards. I know the fans like them. It's going to be better without them. I really do think that's accurate. You're might miss them for a year or two, but honestly, how long does it take for me to remember who won stage 1, 2, 3, whatever the stage playoffs were last year? History's forgetting them already, and they just happened. They're fun in the moment, sure, but I would rather watch teams playing in games that actually mean something for the end of season playoffs, which is the actual goal. I want to see them focused and putting everything into the next meta as soon as it's on the horizon. I don't want my team going back and playing in a meta for 1 to 3 exhibition games. That's not going to help them in stage 4. So it was funny when Houston won to make it into the stage playoffs. I was like trying to do math. I'm like, can they win? Because I want them to be 5-2, but can they also not make the playoffs after they win? Because that would be great too. I'd rather them just scrimming in the 2-2-2 roll-lock. So that's kind of my take on it. I know fans like them, but I don't think even the teams got themselves overly worked up about it. Maybe the bad teams that found their way there for the first time or something gave a little extra, but I don't think your top tier teams were really super concerned with them. And I think it's just unfortunate to get fans worked up or disappointed or angry at the result of a game that just doesn't matter. How weird was it when they were talking about the Vancouver Titans lose for the first time and their record remains 14-0? It's like, okay, great. So what even just happened? It's just awkward. Even if it was fun, I think it wasn't needed. It was extraneous, and we're fine getting rid of it.
That is, I think, certainly a hot take of many. Gil, is your take as hot as Deathblow's here?
Boy, I doubt it's quite as hot as that. And I just want to say, Deathblow, I can agree with you more, okay? And you heard me right. I could. But the one thing I agree with is that it's no longer needed, but I actually think it has been a valuable part of the league, only in that up until this point, because all of the matches are being played in LA, there are no tentpole events that kind of bring the ebb and flow back up, interest in a long season that's Overwatch League. And so while it doesn't really make sense competitively long term, like if they kept this going for 5 years, when after the league was growing and home stands and etc. came into play, like if they kept it going there, I'd be like, okay, you're making some bad decisions. But man, you need just like you need little milestones in your own life to reach to get that hit of dopamine in your brain. that these have been the dopamine hits for the Overwatch League. And all it does is it kind of gives you that one thing that if there's the casual fans, which there are quite a few of them, they're going to watch maybe during those, they're going to watch during World Cup. And so it keeps the Overwatch League growing, even though it really it doesn't make sense competitively. Also, it's not like these players are really, they're probably a little stoked on the prize money, but come on. Like, that's not the reason that they're going to be playing hard during these stage playoffs. So I think it's the right move. It's the right time to move away from that. Next season, you're going to have those hits of dopamine when those teams are coming to your home city, and you can actually go watch them in person. So it's the right move for sure.
Definitely hear there. Katrina, you sounded like you had maybe a different opinion, as you alluded to before. What do you think about the death of the stage?
I'm really happy about the death of the stage playoffs, but for very different reasons. And that is partly involved of that $500,000 on the line for every single stage playoff. And what's made me really, frankly, angry this year is the scheduling determines so much of who gets that money. The Outlaws played I'm sorry, Deathblow, but the Outlaws played the bottom 4 teams in the league. In stage 3,
But they
of
didn't
course
play themselves. Oh, just
They lost
go
a
on.
lot of them too.
Yeah, they did. They sure did. And they also beat Shock fair and square. But the scheduling is definitely an impact that I think makes the stage playoff structure right now flawed and lacking competitive integrity. Shanghai played both the LA Valiant and Guangzhou twice in a single stage. And in stage 4, at the end with that LA homestand, it's going to be amazing games. But you have New York versus Vancouver. You have Shock versus Vancouver. You have these high-stake games that will impact the team's ability to be at stake for all of that prize money. Another thing that was useful for stages was it provided a natural break to implement patches, meta changes. I mean, sure, it hasn't really happened too much this year, but with bye weeks being spread out next year, and it sounds like there's going to be a 1 mid-season break, Blizzard's going to need to find out how to keep the Overwatch League up to date with the current patches in the game without disrupting competitive integrity. And I think stage playoffs do matter, especially for the casual fans. There's a reason stage playoffs are the ones on ABC, the ones on ESPN, where you do get all of that exposure when you're sitting in Buffalo Wild Wings and, hey, there's a video game going on. Oh, wow, there's a 1v1. Someone's taking off his jacket. What's going on? So that excitement that comes from the homestands that in Atlanta or these stage playoffs is so valuable. It makes money. So while I'm super happy that stage playoffs are going, you can't deny that there is value in that emotional excitement, connection for the general population who will need to buy tickets for OWL to be successful next year.
I'd just like to say that no matter what the reason, I'm always excited when I'm in a Buffalo Wild Wings. But also, today's episode brought to you by Buffalo Wild. No.
All right,
Hashtag not an ad.
Slight tangent, but it was awesome. I was talking with Violet after I think semifinals, and he said one of his favorite American experiences was trying the hottest wings at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Nice.
Like, they should have made content from that. That would have been awesome to watch.
I want to get the Toronto guys down to try real chicken wings in Buffalo, but maybe that'll be some off-season content. Who knows? But Mushu, last words here on the stage death, the no more stage playoffs, and OWL 2020.
Yeah. Wow. Shout out to Katrina for the point on competitive integrity on the size of, like, how many teams they play per stage. I did not even think about that. But I think in the same regard that, you know, since you have those kind of those smaller sets, it gives you a little mini reset, right? It gives you new hope for a team that might be struggling, right? Maybe your team is completely eliminated from playoff contention, but stage 3 they can go and have success, right? Like we saw the Outlaws having a huge struggle all season, or the Valiant struggle all season, and then until this point, and then making the playoffs. So, right, it gives you more points of opportunity to have something exciting to look for. And so I really wonder next year how it's going to go in terms of having things for fans to get excited about, especially if teams don't really perform too well, right? And having each stage, again, it just gave you an opportunity for, like, okay, well, we can kind of forget everything else. What about this stage? What about this meta too? And so that's why I also like Katrina's point about how are they going to keep it so that each of the metas are going to like, how do you not affect it, right? Are they just going to have one patch for the entire season 2, or maybe after you play a certain amount of games then it kicks in? So I think those are really good questions there. So I think the thing I'm really looking for is specifically about the excitement of these for these fans of each team. And I think the way they're going to do it is with the homestands, of course. Like when you are there in the venue, they have to make something about that really important. So I don't know if they're going to try to point out and market rivalries for you to really point towards. Of course, there's the Shock Titans rivalry now. You know, Dallas and Houston, of course, like we said, they only play each other once now, which is unfortunate. What else is there? Like, what are going to be the games and that we actually get excited about? What is going to make it a match of the week? So that's what I'm not sure about. And I don't think they've released the details about how the teams qualify for playoffs. Is it going to be promotions from just within Pacific and Atlantic, like Pacific gets 6 and Atlantic gets 6, or is it from each division too? That's what makes division rivalries important now, right? It's like if the Bills can 2-0 the Pats, then they're almost definitely going to be in the playoffs, right? Because they're within the same. For people who don't know that division, it's like they're in the same division. They would be like in the East Division, and since they won both their games, then it's a good chance that they'll move on because the East Division has like 2 spots that they can send, right? Out of 4 teams, if I'm doing the math right. So those are the things I'm really looking for, is how do you actually make it exciting still, because we're getting rid of the stages. So there has to be some way to point to certain games, whether it's rivalries or the math of playoff contention that allows us to look at a game and be like, yes, this is important.
Yeah, definitely a lot of factors that we don't know the answers to yet, but I think the general consensus is OWL 2020 is looking bright nonetheless, and yeah, I personally am excited for it. But we're going to be heading into round number 2 shortly here. We'll be moving away from OWL 2020 discussion and talking a little bit more about some other topics. But a quick recap for the podcast listeners before we move on. Rounding out the back of the pack, we have both Deathblow and Mooshubeef with 23 points. We've got Gillfrost with 25 points. And the newcomer, Katrina, pulling ahead, 27 points. But still a lot of time, still a lot of game left. It's still be
game.
It's
Anybody's
still
game, right, Blevins?
Yeah, beginner's luck.
It's still
Yeah.
anybody's game as we move into round number 2.
Blevins, did you give me points when Mushu just like copied my points then? So
Oh, the shade.
It's real talk here. with
I can
I'll give you
only say that
I'll give you
because
1
I
point
love
for that.
Mushu.
I'll give you 1 point for that.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Man, the shade, the
No,
shade
I mean
being
none
thrown. I
of
love
it.
it.
You're all good.
That's just not true. But we will move on here and talk about 222 roll lock. While at the time of this recording, it has not been officially released. The 222 roll lock. There has been enough independent sources and enough soft confirmation that we're going to treat this as though it is confirmed. The 222 roll lock. No more. The death of goats by default. The death of a lot of those types of comps are going to be locked into 222. And Mushu, we'll start with you here. Did the league need to do this?
Yeah, you know what's hilarious about me already stealing Katrina's points is that part of my prep for this was reading an article that Katrina wrote.
You've got to do. Blevins, you know what you need to do now.
There you go.
That's
but
the
you
way
know,
to go.
I'm gonna,
So
I'm
just
gonna
put the
skirt away
funnel
from
right
those
into
points.
Katrina's points. Okay.
I'm gonna skirt away from those points because I think they're great, and I'll let her take those. I think
Please
222.
use them.
I'll Google it and steal them. That's fine.
Okay, you have to go to Katrina after this then. No, okay, so I think with 222, the one point I'm gonna steal from Katrina and start it off with is that if you're gonna do an OWL, you have to do it across the board, right? And this is something that was part of the discussion of her article, and I think this is definitely like it hones in on what is the most critical parts is that you have an entirety of the path to pro that's dependent on people wanting to make their way to Overwatch League, right? So you really gotta make sure that if you're gonna do an OWL that is consistent across. Other than that, I think this kind of calls into attention like the I think with 222, I hope that there is some reconsideration in terms of roll lock actually happening, especially with Shanghai being able to win in the way that they did, and the way that they did it. We're never going to see another. It's never going to feel as creative as Shanghai, right? Like no one was really trying to do what they did, and even Shanghai up until this point, right? They're still making swaps where they're playing Envy, and they're kind of figuring out the comp, right? And then they just went full on like, hey, these are 2 to 3 comps that we can actually run really well, and that are going to be like people know exactly what we're going to do, but we can still outplay them, right? And it was crazy to see Shanghai go throughout the stage, take down NYXL, where honestly, if I look at NYXL, it felt like they didn't give a ton of opportunities of like they didn't seem like they were playing bad. It just was like this miscommunication. But Shanghai was more of like making plays right on their side, and then you saw with Vancouver, and then with the Shock, like just this evolution of this comp really becoming hardened and like battle hardened because it's going against the best goats teams and somber goats teams and variations of that. And so I think I'm gonna miss that being able to happen in terms of like you're just gonna instantly, like, you have the whole pie of like opportunity, you're gonna be shrinking it down.
Right.
And so I hope that, you know, as we move forward, that we still see, like, it kind of makes me wish, like, hope that there's going to be a lot more heroes added more soon, or you know, we get to a point to where we have other ways of variance, right? Like, how else can we introduce variance into the game? Because otherwise, I do fear that it might get stale if we're locking into 2-2-2,
Right.
and there's the dominant meta, and everyone has to run that.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good points there. But we'll move on here to Deathblow, who, along with myself, has publicly said that we were against hero locking back in the day. If that gives you any sort of idea how long we've been doing this. But Deathblow, what's your stance on 2-2-2 roll lock?
I mean, I do have to mention a part of the same argument that I mentioned when I opposed hero limits, and that's that at a certain point you're limiting the number of different possibilities of interesting and fun and cool compositions that can be brought onto the stage. You do, to a certain extent, handcuff the teams creatively. However, there's more than enough diversity in heroes and you know, play styles within the hero roster that we have available to us now that I don't worry about things like, you know, the meta's becoming stale or anything like that. They're still going to make patches. They're still going to release new heroes. Things are still going to shake up the meta. And I think it honestly gives Blizzard a little bit more freedom when they're developing new heroes and when they're making balance changes to not have to worry so much about creating an unkillable monster like goats. And now the timing of this is all really funny, right? Because we're doing this to kill goats in a meta that was defined by DPS teams playing DPS heroes and beating teams that were GOAT specialists. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think it's overall a very good thing that we're moving into this roll lock. I think just like Hero Limit, we're likely to look back and laugh about the time when Overwatch didn't have roll locking involved in it, and I think it's generally speaking going to be positive. At the end of the day, what I'm not willing to accept is a year of 3 stages of Overwatch League going by and not a single good play from Carpe, who's one of the best players in this league, because he's stuck on a role that he doesn't belong in. I think it helps a lot of other things too. I think it's beneficial for the tier 2 scene and the up and coming players trying to make their way into Overwatch League. Now all of a sudden they're trying to become a hit scan DPS player, so they better get their Brig play in order, and so that way they can fit into the Overwatch League meta. And it's just it's awkward, is what it is, to have these players playing on these heroes that have nothing in common with what their actual skill set is and what kind of earned them their spot on the team. So it got better over time, I think, and metas will always naturally evolve, and we would have moved away from goats as we're seeing this stage naturally. But I think there's enough positives, and it just kind of gives insurance to make sure this can't happen again. Because I think if it didn't happen this stage, what would viewership have looked like this stage if Houston didn't beat the Shock playing DPS and it was still like just 1 or 2 teams that were playing DPS? And I think a lot of that came from them announcing, hey, let's move into 2-2-2 roll lock, and telling the team. So I'm going, okay, well, we don't need to worry about making sure our goats is in tip-top shape for stage 4. So I think it already was a passive benefit behind the scenes before we even found out about it. I think it kind of made the product better. So I'm learning my lesson from opposing the last big fundamental shift to the game, and I'm gonna just close my eyes and trust Blizzard on this one and say I think it's gonna be better.
Well, I don't know if closing your eyes and trusting Blizzard as a general practice is a good idea, but we don't really have much of a choice now.
In the world, my friend.
I'm not going to comment on that. Gillfrost, what are your thoughts here on 2-2-2 roll lock?
I don't know how you can think that it is going to be more static than what this season has been, as far as flexibility and comps of like just the dominance of the 3-3 meta. Like, I never want to go. I still have nightmares about goats and 3-3. And so I think that this is something that is pretty necessary. I think something needed to change. And you can take a few different approaches. You can balance the game such that you try to force teams into basically making the optimal team compositions a little bit more flexible. But I think that they've been trying to do that, and yet these are the top teams with the most coordination. And so if DPS isn't the optimal pick, if you can find a way to shut down any of those picks, then these teams are going to take advantage of that. By forcing the 2-2-2, I think you open things up to even more flexibility, because you're going to have to get creative. You have to get creative to win. And there are a ton of DPS heroes, right? I mean, that's I don't have the numbers in front of me. I could look them up. Where's Google? But I think you can actually get a lot more unique picks with the Force 2-2-2 meta. And it'll be much more interesting to watch, because if I'm being completely honest, when I was like practice casting this last year, it was just brutal. It was just really hard to watch. I think that in the viability of the esport has been called into question by a lot of different sources. And one of the main things is its viewability. It's a fast-paced game. It's complex. It's difficult to observe and watch. And so if you add on top of that basically if you're watching 3-3, it's just two teams bashing against each other until someone dies. It's really hard to tell, like, what happened? Well, somebody died and the one team won the fight. You're just watching the kill feed. That's not interesting to watch. If you change it to a place where Agility gets a Dragon Blade and gets a 6K, which I have some memories of, then immediately allows casual fans or people that only play the game a little bit to engage and enjoy that content a lot more, builds the fan base, sets us up for more future success. The only other thing I'll say about the 2-2-2 lock is, maybe I should leave it to later. I think we're going to talk about something else later, but I think that it is actually going to open things up for the league in some good ways, and I think it's necessary for sure.
Definitely some takes there as well. Katrina, despite the fact that people have been referencing your article, you are last to go here, but that does give you the last word on the 2-2-2 roll lock.
That is true. I am lucky for that, but great points have been made all across the board. One thing I just wish we could, as Deathblow was saying, go into the future and see if a 2-2-2 roll lock will be implemented into my Overwatch game that I play at home. And that's my main issue with how this is being implemented. This hasn't been tested in contenders. This hasn't been implemented in game. And I understand that there are barriers to that from a developmental standpoint. However, to test out a new product in Overwatch League directly, it concerns me a bit. And also I'm worried, are we replacing one monster with another? So the reason we have seen, as Deathblow was also saying, less goats in stage 3 is teams did have permission practically. They knew 2-2-2 was coming stage 4, hypothetically. So that's why we were going to see more of those 3-2-1 comps, a lot more of that DPS. But will that be replaced now with the Clockwork Vendetta composition? Will that be replaced with, once again, another year of dive, bunker comp? So I am a little bit nervous that there won't be as much compositional flexibility, and I feel like it also endangers the flex role, that flex tank role, moving from the Diva to the Sombra, as we have been seeing so much in the past few stages. However, as Left Guy was saying, this is a great choice for the league in terms of marketability. This is stage 4 is the last chance, apart from World Cup, to pretty much entice, to bribe a general population into buying tickets. They go on sale next month. And Headshots Doomfist 2-2-2, that is a way more digestible product that Overwatch League is selling. Like, I remember I took my sister's boyfriend, who does play Overwatch, to the Blizzard Arena, and this was during the GOATS meta, and he had no idea what was going on. And I feel like with someone who already has that familiarity, having trouble deciphering what's in front of the screen, it's a lot easier to see a headshot from Linkser. It's a lot more exciting. Like, my parents get excited, or at least they pretend to be when they see that. So, and even from a player perspective, I was speaking with Jake, and he was saying that even the reasoning for a team fight win in GOATS is confusing, not only for casters, but still the pros within that meta. So there's so many minuscule factors that required this change. 2-2-2 roll lock, or was 2-2-2 roll lock the only thing they could have done? Could they have banned heroes? regardless, a change was specifically necessary to make Overwatch League exciting for the general population.
Yeah, man, I think there's a lot of really good points on both sides of the argument here, and I mean, we're really just gonna have to see how it plays out and hope that the minds of Blizzard have made a decision better than one I would have made, which I don't even know what I would. I would have kept. I want to see 5 Winstons and a D.Va play. That's what I want to see. But again, neither here.
Then it's easier to watch.
Right, it's easier to watch because everyone's a Winston. Duh.
Like
Or
us,
1v1.
Yeah, there's only 3 things you do: you jump, you lightning gun, you shield.
This is why you're in plat, because you don't melee.
That's a hot take.
I am very proud of myself for giving off the illusion that I'm actually in plat. But let's move on.
He's not in plat.
Yeah, you can't call me plat, chat, because I'm in gold forehead. Let's move on. Keep it in the same realm of 222, but hone it in a little bit. Obviously, as a high concept, there's a lot of different opinions we can have, but assuming it's happening, and assuming it's happening in the Overwatch League, some teams are going to stand to benefit, and some maybe not. But so, Gil, we'll start with you. What team really, in your mind, benefits the most from 222 Rollock?
This is definitely a tough one. I think when I was looking across all of the teams, I really gravitated towards the center of the pack. The teams that maybe, don't have the best tank line, maybe don't have the outstanding healing backline, but really have strong DPS that are not being properly utilized right now. And so they're kind of in the middle bottom. But I'm gonna take a hot take here, and I'm actually gonna say that I think that this is the meta that brings NYXL to the top. I think that if they do the 222 lock, I think you got SBB, Pine, even Libero, Flower, the rest of the gang. I think that they can actually utilize this incredibly well, and they're going to be the ones that finally are on top this time around.
Gil is an OG when it comes to ATP, and he knows how to get points when he needs them. Katrina, who do you think is going to benefit the most from 222 Rollock?
I mean, the first teams you think of are probably Philly, London, and New York Excel, but the team that I think will benefit the most, and I'm sorry in advance, Deathblow, for taking your point, is probably the Houston Outlaws.
Not my team.
Perfect, then it works out.
We could literally see a Houston Outlaws hat in the background.
Wait a second.
No, they're my team. I root for them, but not who I was going to pick. So
Perfect.
I'm glad I get to hear it, and I still get my choice, too.
Here, this is for you. I feel like with Philly, London, and NYXL, those teams' starting rosters will likely not shift too much. Houston have been seeing a lot more success with running the 3-2-1 this past stage, but they finally seem to solidify starters, which they had not in stage 1 and 2. They were being a bit more experimental. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston returns to their comfort picks from last year's stage 1, season 1 of the Mercy meta, and that was what led them to a 3rd place stage 1 finish. Classic bunker, maybe they'll bring in Baptiste instead. Pretty cheesy, but it worked for them and it could work for them again. Now, kind of taking another spin, the question is for a lot of teams, including the San Francisco Shock, who we saw bring out more of that DPS-focused roster, who we would anticipate seeing in 222, how much does lack of stage time impact the benched players to be put in instead of the ones who have been starting for the past 3 stages? So Moth said that there was no communication or chemistry issues after the final with map 1. But still, Shock later opted to stay with that synergy of their permanent roster, and this directly impacted them with dealing with Ding on that Pharah later in this final. Sinatra said him and Rascal can't play Widow. They can't play that hit scan. So they avoided bringing in Architect to retain that compatibility of their original roster. So I think that with teams who have the potential to go to 222 Rollock, I want to see the teams who are already starting those heroes. So like with Philly, you've got your Poco, your Sato, your EQO. I mean, you all know the lineup. That's a traditional 222 lineup that could really work as well.
Yeah, they definitely seem like they can expand quite a bit here. Moosh, who do you got here improving the most from 222?
I really want to say I'm just gonna say it. Like, I think the shock will improve quite a bit, and so you can hear me out here because my hesitation was that they are already at the top. But I will say the shock, and then future teams who will start to set up their teams in this way, which is that as Katrina started to allude to, is that they had specialists in for control point, right? And that was probably the reason why. Actually, I haven't. This is not confirmed, but I mean, this is the only valid explanation for why I think like they would put on a different roster versus Shanghai in game 1 of the control map, is because they knew that they were going to be dealing with triple DPS composition from Shanghai in control point, so they wanted to fight them with a triple DPS composition themselves. So looking at it that way, what I want to take away from that is that Shock brought on a ton of DPS players, and not knowing where the meta was going to go, or for whatever reason, the fact is they have a ton of really, really skilled people. Now those people, if you see 222 row lock, I think you'll see teams start trending towards having specialists more about, even more so than they do now, right? It gives you more reason to have specialists because in terms of your DPS, do you need someone who can do projectile and hit scan at the same time? Then that's this player, right? If you need someone who only is going to do hit scan, because on hybrid, hit scan becomes the meta, right? Like you run double hit scan on this, that becomes how teams start to work. So originally I was thinking about people like see the Philadelphia Fusion, we'll see London, right? People and Seoul with Fleta, right? All these people who have been in Brig jail or who were sitting on the bench, who are like Surefour, right? Like who we know are these really skilled players, but because of the meta, it doesn't really fit to have them on the roster on the stage playing for the team. So I think we'll see 2-2-2 for these pro teams. We'll start to see more specialization than we did even now, even though a lot of teams started doing like they have a certain roster for just control point maps, and then everyone else was like the normal starting roster. I think this will encourage that more so in that way, just because we'll start seeing metas of DPS combinations, tank combinations, support combinations start to come through if we see the rollout come through first each different specific map type.
Yeah, I mean the more specialization is something that we talked about like years ago in Overwatch League, like way before Overwatch League, way before anything like that. We talked about having specific one-off compositions and one-off picks for certain maps and whatnot. But Deathblow, you already said you're not picking the Houston Outlaws, and they already got taken. So who do you got?
My number 1 team is still here, the one I wanted, so I'm glad for that. You guys fell into the classic trap of picking the teams with DPS players on the bench. Main tanks won't suddenly stop being important. Orisa looks to be the tank of choice in this stage, and I think when we look at what teams have very good Orisa play, something tells me that London showed me something in the playoffs last year. It says they have very possibly the best Orisa player in the league. I also think on top of that, not only getting Gesture on one of his best heroes, but now you also get to set Prophet loose. You get to let Birdring play Widowmaker, which he is considerably more comfortable at than every other hero in the roster. And I think that gives the London Spitfire, as boring of an answer as that is, nobody wants to see them get hot at the right time at the end of the season and win the league again. But I think we've seen a very similar meta to what I think we're going to be seeing after 2-2-2 Rollock goes in. And it's not going to include balance changes. I believe they've said it's going to be, maybe it was in the leak from the phone call that Katrina was talking about earlier. But I believe they said there's no balance changes going into stage 4. It's just the implementation of 2-2-2. And we're going to see a lot of Orisa play as a result. I have not seen anybody play Orisa better than Gesture did in the playoffs last year. So they're my pick. I think he's an X factor, and just taking the handcuffs off of Prophet is enough. Those two things together should do great things for London.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I don't want to see that again,
yeah, I hope I really do. But logically, it makes the most sense to me.
Hard to disagree with that, but I do think all of the teams that were brought up are very good answers, honestly. But we're gonna move on here to the last question in round number 2, and maybe this ties a little bit more back into our questions from round 1. But we did it was confirmed, and we mentioned it a little bit before. We are obviously doing the home stands, but there's not necessarily the same number of home stands. So some teams are doing 2, some teams are doing upwards of 5, and obviously, we've talked on High Noon Podcast about home field advantage matters. Sports magic, as much as it sounds like a joke, is a real thing. Having thousands of people cheering for you is an advantage. So, Katrina, we'll start with you here. How big of a deal is it that the schedule is laid out in such a way that there's an unequal number of homestands for each of the teams?
So there was an article on the Washington Post talking about how in both Dallas and Atlanta homestands, the teams went 2-0. They had perfect records. Remember who those home teams were playing. Florida Mayhem, Toronto for Atlanta. I remember Dallas played Houston in their 0-7 stage. I feel like right now home field advantage is important. Yes, we see that in every single sport. But at the same time, there are so many positives and negatives with having that hype behind you. I was talking with Baby Bay, and he was saying how the hype actually makes him play sometimes a little bit careless. And when I believe it was after Atlanta lost to the San Francisco Shock in week 1 of stage 3, I believe, when they got so close in map 5, they choked because of all of that pressure. They thought that this would actually amplify in the homestand weekend. So that can be a disadvantage. Home field advantage, yeah, that's a thing. But it also goes both ways in esports. The hype can be hard to control. This is my main point, though. Business-wise and interest-wise, I think it could be a big deal that there are an unequal amount of homestands. My concern with these really revolves around who the teams will market to, and if the novelty of a live esports event will wear off for more casual fans, for locals who haven't seen Overwatch League before, who are really needed to fill in those seats for this endeavor to be successful. So the Blizzard Arena right now is sadly very empty every week. There's 16 games a week over 4 days. That's natural. It makes sense that the excitement has faded. And now that the stage playoffs will be gone and Battle of LA it might be, well, it'll still happen twice a year. But those exciting moments that bring in crowds, they're not really as implemented as much unless these interdivisional rivalries really come to a head. So my main questions going into this is, how will tickets be priced and sold? Will these homestands be the same structure where 4 teams compete at a time? Because at the Atlanta homestand, going back to that, when Guangzhou was playing against Shanghai, I believe was the game, there was pictures of empty sections when the home team is not playing. And this was the first Atlanta homestand where that hype is going to be there. That's the first time. That's Atlanta coming home. That's esports bringing it back to the fans. So I'm not worried about home games necessarily. But for the Washington Justice, when they have 5 homestands in a row, well, not in a row, but for the season, gosh, that'd be a lot. I worry that with that Atlantic South division, that the competitive standards will be low, and that won't bring in the people to fill the seats and make the money. So I could see it going either way.
Yeah. A lot of great points there. I think you may be the first Around the Payload guest to answer the question with a series of other questions that I'm going to have to take back and think about. But I do like it nonetheless. Definitely a lot of good points to think about there. Mushu, what's your analysis here on the inequality of homestands?
I think the impact on the teams because of the travel and the schedule is going to have a much larger impact on their success than home field advantage. I think we'll definitely, they'll get a burst of energy. Sure. Like they have the teams cheering for them. They have it definitely, it's undeniable across the board. You, in every interview and every instance, you can truly tell a genuine difference when the teams are playing for the team that they represent. For the city they represent, in that city, right, or in that state, or whoever they're representing. But it still looks like a really, really challenging schedule. There's going to be games every week, right? It's like, how long are these buys going to be? Is it just going to be 1 week off? And even if they get 1 week off every month, isn't that basically what we had last year, right? So, and that you also throw in travel on top of that. So, I don't want to say that home field advantage doesn't matter, because that's what the question is about. But I think to answer that, like, yes, it does matter. but we're going to see a lot more fatigue next year, in my opinion, unless we see a drastically different schedule, right? Like having, again, like unless it's more than like 1 week off per month, then I think it's going to be really challenging for these teams to kind of maintain their energy. I think we're going to still continue to see the same rate of burnout as we do this year.
Yeah, definitely. Again, another unsung villain potentially with going into 2020. DB, inequality. What do you think?
I think was unavoidable this time around. I'll say this though, I wish it was less of a difference. The difference between 5 home stands weekends in your venue and 2 is a big difference. It is a clear competitive advantage for the teams that get to host more of them. It's just to play in front of a supportive crowd and to have your opponents playing in front of a hostile crowd, I don't think can really be understood unless you've experienced it. And I've only experienced it on the high school sports level. I'm sure it pales in comparison to what a professional sports level would have.
I don't know. Those fans and parents get pretty brutal as someone who's dealt with it as well.
But you're not wrong, and I don't think I am either, though, that it just gets worse, right, when it becomes a professional thing, and just the sheer volume of people in the room that are booing or cheering for you just has an impact as well. I mean, we saw what it can give you emotionally. OGE crying at the end of the Dallas weekend, right, because just overcome with the emotion of just that many people cheering for them, rooting for them, celebrating with him after his win. I think it's clear and obvious the impact that'll have. And I just want to counter Mushu's point that he made real fast, though, before I yield the floor. These poor professional video game players and the burnout, and it's just so rough. Go sit in a cubicle between 9 and 5, like every other person in the world. If you want to experience burnout, go sit in a cubicle from 9 to 5. It is draining, and it's just, I would trade places to give me half the money I make now to do their job. I'll take it in a heartbeat. So I don't have sympathy there as far as burnout's concerned. I didn't in season 1, I don't in stage 2, and I'm certainly not gonna in stage 3. It's going to be good, and like I said, I don't think it was avoidable. I think they needed to do it to alleviate some of these teams are just more ready. Some of these markets are more ready to host these games than others, so it was needed now. I'm a little upset that there's a 3-game difference from some of them compared to others, but at the end of the day, if that's what we needed to do to get it started, to get the ball rolling and go, fine, because I didn't want to wait any longer to do that.
Right.
So I'll support it. I'm not railing against it, but it needs to get better over time and have more balance to it. Otherwise, it's unfair.
Yeah, definitely. All 2020 definitely seems like a infrastructure season, if nothing else. Gil, last words here.
Yeah, more baby steps. Or if you're moving as fast as Overwatch League is moving compared to other esports and traditional sports, really huge steps from a small person, I guess.
Really big baby.
Baby leaps.
Baby leaps, baby rolls, we'll say. But no, I agree. I think this is it's definitely a factor, but it's not a major factor right now. I don't think that it's going to be something that compromises competitive integrity in any large way. Also, I don't think you can call it home field advantage at all, because this is going to be home field for the fans, but this is not going to be home field for the players who have been in LA for, however long, and likely will still live in LA. And if they don't live in LA, they're traveling most of the year. So they're not going to have like the same level of comfort in their home stadium. Then the main factor that is, the fans are cheering for them, or they're booing against their opponents, or booing against them if you're not in your home stadium. But we have yet to see exactly how that's going to impact the players and teams. I don't think anybody can argue that it's not going to have some kind of impact. So we'll see. But I wouldn't necessarily call it an advantage. The other thing I was going to ask is, I think in Blizzard's article, they said specifically that most teams are going to do 2 homestand weekends, and some teams are going to do 3. I don't know where this number 5 is coming out. I don't think any team is going to do 5 weekends of homestands. Maybe that's coming from LA doing multiples, because it's just there's 2 teams there. And so with that, I think they are probably going to balance it as best they can. The other business element of that is and I'll put myself out there, if any team makes money on any homestand weekend next year, I'll go do the Buffalo Wild Wings hot wing challenge or whatever, the spicy
I'll
wing.
do that
I
with you. I agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe I'll dye my hair or like shave my head, but let's not. That's nothing. We're basically already there. So we'll do the hot wing challenge. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, let me check your Twitter account for you real fast. At Dallas Fuel, July 16th, yesterday. Did you hear? We have secured 5 Dallas Overwatch weekends for the Overwatch League 2020 season.
Wait, Dallas Twitter?
Wang Zhao did as well. Yeah, they tweeted it.
Wow.
Washington also.
Washington as well is another one that I think.
That's where it's from. Boy, I must not be following the right. Oh yeah, that's right. I've been trying to stay off Twitter for toxic negativity. No, he said, checking his Twitter and seeing that he tweeted right before this podcast. But no, yeah. And with that said, also not every team is prepared to run events of this magnitude. I think that because they've been trying to build up towards it, most orgs have been trying to get there, and so they're going to have to do it at least a little bit. But some orgs are definitely going to be more able to do that, and maybe more efficiently, so they'll lose less money from doing that. But also, right now, it's all about building fans. It's not about maintaining the highest degree of competitive integrity. That's always a major factor that they have to consider. But the main objective of the Overwatch League right now is to build the infrastructure to grow into the future in such a way that it is sustainable and that the fans keep filtering in and staying. And I think that homestands are going to achieve that.
Yeah. We definitely need to make a lot of gigantic baby steps. Yeah. Now, whether those are...
Sorry.
I like baby leaves.
One more thing.
I'm actually also excited at the prospect of having multiple homestand weekends happening in any given weekend, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how they handle that. It's going to take a step closer to more traditional sports broadcasting and scheduling, which I also think has to happen. And that, I mean, maybe it's just like the event organizer and caster in me that like really wants to see how they handle that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, for a more than just a casual fan of one team, if someone wants to watch, like you're probably not going to be watching both. I guess they could time them so that they're not happening at the same time, but they're gonna. It might. Well, they probably will, but I think regardless, they are going to be pushed a little bit to make their VODs better. Like, don't necessarily rely on Twitch VODs, which are not the greatest thing in the world. Just saying. Actually, I can say whatever I want, but I don't know. We have no sponsorship with Twitch. I don't care. They can't take away the nothing they're giving us. So yeah, no. Make your VOD system better. Either Twitch or Blizzard. Banned. Yep. Oh God, we are banned for a second time. But that is going to be the end of round number 2. We are quickly running out of time here, so we're going to breeze through round 3. But before we do that, a quick recap of the scores. This is a tight one. We still have Mushu still hamstringing himself a little bit. Woo-hoo. 55 points. Deathblow made a little bit creeping up with a comeback, 57 points. And we've got a tie right now. Katrina and Gil at 58 points as we move into round number 3.
The payload is approaching its destination.
Whoop.
Round number 3, of course, is the buy or sell round. Buy is agree, sell is disagree for those of you who are new. First topic here is the Shanghai Dragons, who in this Stage 3 playoffs beat the number 1, number 2, and number 3 teams in the NYXL San Francisco Shock and Vancouver Titans, then San Francisco Shock in these playoffs. So the question here is buy or sell. The Dragons are the new GOATs. Greatest of all time. Anyone? Crickets?
Greatest of current time, I think.
I was actually
but
curious,
that does.
You mean like their composition is the new goats, or
no? Okay, I was trying to do a play on words, like the Dragons are now goats, like they're really good because they beat the top team. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Minus points for Blevins.
Yes.
Minus points.
Yeah.
Triple entendre.
Yeah, it was. Sorry, it was too highbrow. You uncultured swine didn't get it. But Deathblow, we'll start with you. Buy or sell. The Dragons are the best team in Overwatch League right now. I guess it's less clever.
I can't sell this fast enough. After last stage, when San Francisco won and people were talking about them like they were the best team in the league, I made the argument that the best team in the league succeeds over an extended period of time. The Vancouver Titans had not lost a game in the regular season yet. They remained the best team to me. I believe I put San Francisco third behind New York as well. Look how right I turned out to be. I'm not changing that attitude now. The Shanghai Dragons caught lightning in a bottle. They looked really good. They figured out a meta. It's not a negative, right? There's not taking anything away from what Shanghai did, but recency bias is a thing. If you think they're the best team in the league right now, you're drunk on it. You're just going off of what you saw this past weekend. There's nothing wrong with that, but except for it being wrong. I'm selling it for sure. And there's no possible way. Talk to me at the end of the regular season playoffs. If you want me to tell you who the best team in the league is, I'll tell you who wins. It's not the stage 3 champions.
1v1 me, bro.
1v1 me on Kings Row, bro.
By the way,
yeah.
I'm fine.
Gil, what do you think? Are buying or selling Shanghai right now?
Definitely selling Shanghai. Yeah, lightning in a bottle is a good way to put it. They definitely were on the uptick with the comp that they were bringing, and I think that it honestly worked really well against. I didn't publicly say anything about this, but I did think that they were going to win. The finals.
I'm looking at Brain Twitter right now, and he did Brain tweet that.
See, there it is. No, I mean, if you look at the Shock playing against Seoul, they really struggled against the Pharah composition, and then you've got this other team coming in who's playing almost exclusively Pharah, and it just didn't add up. I honestly thought when the Shock came out in their first game with their B squad, and it wasn't Super, who really excels on the horizontal fights on that Reinhardt. When they came out with a different look, it told me, I'm like, oh, they actually have an answer to this. They're going to try to deal with this Pharah composition. But then it was their B squad. They weren't as comfortable. It was very clear that out of the gate, they didn't get first blood, so to speak. They took them a little bit to get their stuff together. Once they did, I did actually feel like if that was like a best of 5 control point, which doesn't exist, they actually could have come back. If they had maybe played them a few more maps, maybe they would have gotten their sea legs and done a lot more with that. They put the main roster back in, so we'll never know. They brought it to Game 7, but no, I got to sell. I think that they were perfect in this matchup, and they were lightning in a bottle with that team composition.
A lot of good points there. Katrina, buying or selling the Shanghai Dragons being at the top of the league after beating number 1, number 2, and number 3?
All right, I'm also going to sell. Something great and exciting about Overwatch League is that at any given day, a team can beat another. The Valiant beat the Titans. Atlanta, for God's sake, beat New York Excel twice in a row. Does that make Atlanta a top-tier team? No way.
Just makes Nixel average.
Well,
I would still say, though,
you can still lose points even if you're not talking.
Based on my tier list, though, I would still say that Valiant and Shock, with NYXL in a tight third, followed by Hangzhou and Seoul, then I would say Shanghai. And that's because, as the others have said, consistency is vital to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And right now, within the setting of Season 2, it's hard not to say the San Francisco Shock are that. Even though, yes, we have been talking about how stage playoffs might have less meaning to specific teams, to make it to the finals 3 times in a row. Mm-hmm. Also, in a different meta in stage 3. And we could be seeing strength, if Mushu is correct, we could be seeing them retain that strength in stage 4. There are so many other viable options other than Shanghai. Shanghai has a lovable story. That doesn't mean that they have the greatest of all time performance, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
History was made.
I know, that's what, please hold your tears until the end of the show. Mushu, last words here. Are you the last savior, the last maybe potential buyer of Shanghai?
Well, I mean, if no one else is buying it, then does that mean it's the lower price? Because, you know.
In my store, absolutely not.
Economics.
It's economics, thank you. There's that curve where there's the stuff. You know what? I'm going to, I want to play the opposite side. I'm going to do it. This is the beginning of the greatest of all time team. that we're seeing for stage 2, for season 2 of the Overwatch League. And let me tell you why. No, so I mean, I think I agree that what we've seen and what Shanghai has done in this playoffs is they peaked at the perfect time, lightning in the bottle, however you want to say it. They came and showed up at this specific moment. And so what I'm really struggling here to try to play the devil's advocate because I don't want this to be
You're doing a good job. I just
thank
gotta
you
say that.
thank you.
Yeah.
I just
It's
you
a
know,
hard
I think
one.
admitting it is a really good way to like be very convincing that it, no, so for Shanghai, I look at what they did, and because the gap is and the story is such a good one because no one expected this to happen except for Bren, who called it apparently on
and
day one
all
of
of
playoffs.
the perfect hindsight vision folks on Reddit and Discord, by the way. But
Another one to add to it. Just the big brain, he can see the future. But I'm gonna lean on, in terms of saying like, why would you say Shanghai's the best team? Like you can't say it right now. I mean, I have to. You can't say that right now. But in terms of the ingredients to make this happen, the coaching behind the scenes, them going and making this game plan that took down 3 of the top teams who could play the dominant meta that we've all been complaining about for so long, to make a game plan that could take that out, even though all the other teams knew exactly what Shanghai was going to do. Were there any surprises? No, there were no surprise of what Shanghai would do here, and yet they were still able to win. So that for me is between their preparation on how to play that composition, and then in terms of the intuitiveness in which you saw that team play together, like the way that they covered reses, the way that Gamsu stayed alive for way too long, right? Like, or the timing of him jumping, of him going in there, and Youngjin going in with Doomfist, and Farah hitting the right player, or who I'm blanking on his name now, who the player who played Farah.
Ding.
Yeah, Ding. Like
Ding.
Ding. How could I forget?
That's supposed to
Like
happen.
there's a thank you. There is so much to look at as like what may have been chance is them peaking at the right time, but the ingredients that it took to get them to this point are for sure. There's their coaching and just the way that that team is starting to really, really gel. And I think that's going to serve them really well going into this next stage. Even if there's a 2-2 lock, I think there is the way that they can go and make that game plan work so well against teams that, regardless of what you say, NYXL, if they threw or not because of their composition, like they brought it to them and they executed, and that's something that no other team can really say that they did.
yeah, I was expecting at least a few more buys there, but everyone had a good had some good points there. Death, I did take a point away from you for smack talking NYXL, but enough people also said lightning in a bottle, so I'll give you that point back as we go into this last question. And this is not meant to be a meme question, but I guess it kind of is maybe. But we'll start with you, Mushu. Buy or sell that NYXL really does just choke in every single playoffs? Just so that no one has to change their answers. I'm not going to. I won't. The Panda Bear can stay away. I'm not going to take away points for going.
Like, oh,
even
no.
though I'm decked out in NYXL gear, just say your honest points and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I could see like the steam coming out of your ears, like the like calculus face meme, just like how many points can I get?
I'm missing the bottom anyway. So, so for NYXL, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna buy this. And I think because what they've shown is they don't. I don't think they actually like tilt on stage, or they're actually trying to throw. I think that their preparation, their game plan, somehow consistently has been has not worked, right? I don't think it's the execution. I didn't think it's their game plan going into it. The other teams consistently prepare better against NYXL than NYXL can prepare against their the opposite side. So yes, like in terms of them, do they choke at every playoffs? I'll say that in the preparation compared to like the other playoff teams when they play against them, like it doesn't make sense for me for why they just fundamentally have these what I'm calling preparation issues going into it. And then on top of that, their flexibility or their lack of trying to change, like they kept the same exact roster throughout the entirety of their series versus Shanghai. So I think their inability to change and adapt on the fly, and then the preparation being subpar for teams who make playoffs, I'll say that yes, NYXL chokes every playoff.
Definitely begrudgingly hear you there. Deathblow, buying or selling the NYXL chokes every playoffs?
Oh, I'm selling this. Come on, they won stage 2 and stage 3 last year. How can we say they choke at every single one of them if they haven't and they've won 2 of them? What I will say is they have a propensity to either choke or underperform in the playoffs. And there's a difference between the two of them. They're more likely than most to do this. But listen, they make every single stage playoff and every single playoff. So of course you see them lose them more than you see the other teams. That's part of what comes from making it, right? You're going to lose more often in the playoffs than teams that don't get there. And as fun as it is to talk about and as fun as sandbagging memes are, that was, I think, a little bit a part of it. They played themselves last season, right? Like they really did. I think they took their foot off the gas. And they were just not at their top form going into season playoffs. That led to them underperforming. That's different to me than choking. Choking is when Nene throws his graviton surge in the dirt in the stage 1 playoffs this year.
My heart.
There's differences. So the question is, do they really choke at every playoff? No. A third of the time they win, a third of the time they choke, and a third of the time they underperform. So they don't have a great record in the playoffs, and I'm not going to deny that. But no, they absolutely do not choke given every opportunity because they've proven they can win 2 of them.
I begrudgingly agree with every point that you made. Gillfrost, buying or selling NYXL chokes?
Yeah, I sell. I got to sell this one. The fact that they literally have won some stage playoffs. It's been a little while, but and maybe they choked stage 1. Maybe. I'm not even gonna say that. But you look at stage 2, and who did they lose to? Vancouver, who was tearing it up, and then they just lost against a team who was peaking and just honestly slaying just in these playoffs. Not the GOAT. Okay, now I'm going back a question, but yeah, I gotta sell. I don't think that they're choking. I just think they haven't had their one shot, their one opportunity. Mom's spaghetti, you know.
Oh, now there's a Pander Bear point for you.
That's
right
5
there.
points right there.
Katrina, last words here on NYXL and their choking or lack thereof. Buy or sell?
All right, I'm also going to be selling this. They did not choke this playoff. Shanghai was completely dominant with their triple DPS, and NYXL made an error, I believe, in not choosing to put in Sabiolbi, who had played in most maps of stage 3 in favor of Meko. And Meko is extremely talented. He's a phenomenal player, but he hadn't played on stage. And I know I keep going back to this point, but this has shown to be important for so many different teams, especially with players getting these long breaks due to meta shifts. So New York Excel made specific choices that led to their loss and were also outclassed by Shanghai in the specific playoffs, excuse me. But one thing to note is that whenever New York has downtime or a break, even I believe it was in stage 2 when they didn't play at the Dallas homestand, I feel like you see a significant drop in their gameplay once you do have those bye weeks, once you do have, like even in last year, that long break between playoffs and them knowing that they were eligible, that they had made it into that elite group. So New York Excel is definitely an interesting team to watch in playoffs, but as Deathblow's been saying, their focus isn't on the stages. It's on the season final. And I hope for you, Blevins, that they learned from last year, and I think that they will. My hot take of today is that New York Excel will at least make the final, and my pick is that they're going to win it.
Oh, you heard it here.
Wow.
I mean, I love the pick. I can't say much more than that. But that is going to bring us to the end of the regular questions here. This is the time where we bid farewell to 2 of our hosts and move on to the final question. Deathblow, I will say this for the record. This might be the highest point scoring game we've ever had on Around the Payload.
Wow.
I'd have to consult the history books. If someone is an Around the Payload historian, they can correct me here. But at least in recent memory, this might be the highest scoring game. But unfortunately, Deathblow, you are out in 4th place with 69 points. Mushu also, unfortunately, did not make the cut here with 70. But that does mean that with 72 points apiece, Gillfrost and Katrina are moving into the final question here.
The payload is approaching. approaching its destination.
I got golf
And-
claps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can clap.
Which does mean we are down to one last question here. There's no points given out. Both contestants are going to be able to answer the question, and then these two schmucks on my left and right in the bottom are going to be able to vote to see who they believe is the champion. And if they cannot come to a consensus, then we bring in old Papa Blev to make the final decision. I've never once said that in my entire life, and I hope I never say it again. But we're going to move here to the final question, and that is going to be, in the vein of Owl 2020 and there being home stands and home games and home fans, we're going to have some names for these hometown fans. We have here in Buffalo, we've got the Bills Mafia. There's for the Green Bay Packers, the Cheeseheads. There's Red Sox Nation, Jurassic Park in Toronto. So I want to know what's going to be the name of one of these fan groups for an Overwatch League team, if you had to pick one. And with the flip of a coin, the choice, Gillfrost, you're going first. Man, I made that way more complicated than it needed to be. I didn't even look at the coin.
Alrighty. So, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the Outlaws are my home team, even though currently I'm living in Dallas. I think that they're gonna be called the Texas Hard. That's the Hard, the Texas Hard. No, I think we already have their name. It's the Lone Star Vanguard. I don't think any of the Lone Star Vanguard are in the chat right now. I kind of wish I should have told them to come watch, but that's the current fan group that's been going to all the matches and been putting in all the hard work. So big shout out to the Lone Star Vanguard community for all the hard work they've been putting in as probably the best fans in all of Overwatch.
Oh man, the sellout
Texas Hard.
Yeah. The sellout and shill on the last question. I respect it, if nothing else. Katrina, what is your answer here?
First, to show the sheer power of that Texas Hard hashtag, every single time Houston has lost, my mom texts me Texas Soft. So first of all,
it's not even the worst thing I've heard.
I know, well, it's my
but
mom
is it
who makes it worse.
but is it the worst thing you've heard from your mom? Is the question?
Sadly not. Sadly not. But anyways, going back to your actual question, so I currently live in LA, but I'm a Chicagoan born and raised, and we don't have an Overwatch League team. We should. But the team that I have really fallen in love with, and I think of as my home team now, is the Seoul Dynasty. And I really sure have hopped onto that Seoul train. Being a Seoul Dynasty fan is so stressful, so exciting, so meaningful. And all of the fans that I have met have so much heart and love for the Seoul Dynasty. We just come rumbling in, ready to support, our hearts open, soon to be hearts broken usually. But that consistency is there. And unlike most trains, we'll make it on time for our team.
So you're going with the Soul Train.
The Soul Train.
I like it. So we have the Lone Star Vanguard and the Soul Train. Deathblow, who is your vote going for?
Yeah, it's tough. Katrina's got the better name, but Gil went with the correct team. It's definitely tough. Seoul is gonna derail themselves if there's a train involved. I'm fairly certain of that. Man, Gil, if you'd went with the in-laws, which is what I would have went with, then I would have been all over.
Oh my god.
I've got to go with Soul Train. It's just more clever, and yeah, she didn't sell out either. So I guess 2-1.
Man.
I have my integrity.
The in-laws, whew, man, that's almost an auto win there. But unfortunately, you are not in the running. Mushu, are you concurring with Deathblow and choosing Soul Train as the victor, or are we going to have to defer to me? If you can end it here.
He votes if there's a tie.
I love Soul Train, and I was so close to jumping on that train. But I am always late, and I feel like the Vanguard would be there for me. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna go with the Houston Vanguard. Wait, what was it again? Houston
Lone
Outlaws
Star
Vanguard?
Vanguard. Oh, you loved it so much you remembered it perfectly.
You're my favorite.
So close.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, they feel like free spirits, but they're responsible and they're what I feel truly deep down. So I'm gonna have to go with whatever Gillfrost said.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Loved it so much that he remembered it precisely and didn't just defer entirely to make me vote. But that's
And
okay.
just to be clear, I had two names. Okay, like I went with Lone Star Vanguard, but I still think the Texas Hard should be what we're judging against. You know?
So we have the Texas Hard versus the Soul Train, and man, this is really tough. I almost wanted to pull something unprecedented and declare no winner, declare myself and the 5 Deadly Venoms as the winner, but that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen here, man. This one's tough. On the one hand,
Just do it. Get it over
the Soul Train is such a good name. But I would imagine the Soul Train, like if the Soul management was actually compiling a Soul Train, they'd have the caboose in the middle half the games, and Fleta wouldn't even be on the train half the time.
But think of how it's spelled. Soul.
Jake would be playing. Jay Hong would be playing Winston on that train.
Yeah,
I'm gonna miss Jay Hong so much. I feel like that's not gonna work out. But
yeah. I mean,
what makes you feel like you belong? Do you want to be associated with people who say, "Oh, we're so Texas hard" when you lose all the time, or do you want to be with a team that knows who they are and supports them either way?
I mean, I don't want any of that. But here's the other thing. The audacity to say that the Lone Star Vanguard is the best fan group in the Overwatch League, even if you are contractually and legally obligated to say it, is an absolute offense to me as a human being, an Overwatch League fan. And by default, I cannot pick that. 5 Deadly Venoms all the way.
Let's try to get you some followers.
Which is
here.
good. You know what? I don't want followers. You know what? If you're a Lone Star Vanguard, unfollow me right now. I don't care. That's how much I don't care. 5 Deadly Venoms. No, not really. Please subscribe on twitch.tv/HighNoonPodcast. But regardless, the rant for me is over. I'm picking the Soul Train here. I like the name better. I think it's a better name. And the victory here is yours, Katrina. The newcomer comes in and destroys. Oh, Gil back hitting the bottle again. We got him back. Off the wagon, on the train, I think, if nothing else. But Katrina, the victory is yours. The floor is yours. Sell out, shout out, do what you will.
All right. Well, thank you again, Blevins, for having me here. I mean, this is my first time, and it's been one of the most. All right. I know this sounds corny, but it's been so much fun just hanging out and hearing all of your perspectives. So thank you all for teaching me a lot this past hour or so. I write with Upcomer. We have really great writing on Overwatch, CSGO, League of Legends, anything that you want to know. I also help cast with the Broadcast GG community. That's why Mushu and I can bicker sometimes and get away with it, still be friends. So thank you to that. But no, ultimately, just have fun. Go Soul. Go all the teams right now. Go NYXL for you, Blevins. I just stay positive, everybody. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I do think that regardless, that OWL 2020 is definitely going to be very exciting. And even Stage 4 with that looming is going to be very fun for everyone. But, guys, that is going to be it. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to Around the Payload. Thank you to my wonderful guests for being here and putting their time in and really putting on a great show. That is going to be it, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you are a podcast listener, you can check it out live. Make sure you do. We tweet at High Noon Podcast on Twitter. Over at twitch.tv/HighNoonPodcast is where you can catch it live. And we had a really active chat as well that, man, if we brought in the chat, it would be even more crazy because there's some side convos going on that are great. But, guys, thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. That is going to be it for Gillfrost, for Katrina, for Mushu, for Deathblow. I'm the Blevins, and we will catch you guys next time around the payload. Bye-bye.